Good morning. Today I wanted to talk about repairs and how repairing things is almost a necessity because of what it gives you, the power that it gives you, the money that it saves you, the opportunity it affords you. And this is primarily going to be about, electronics repair, because that's, this applies to other things like plumbing and stuff like that. Being able to do your own repairs is a big deal, but particularly for electronics, because they tend to be made cheaply, like almost to the component level, and it winds up that you can have things that are really well priced as long as you're capable of putting a little bit of time and effort into them. So there's one of the things is that, the first thing is probably a crock pot. This was about 8 years ago. The crock pot's over 10 years old at this point, and it died for whatever reason. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it, and I had no idea any electronics repair, hardly any repair just in general. This is only about 8 years ago, so it's not it's not like I was raised doing this stuff. It's all self-taught in the last 8 years. And I had basically no idea what I was doing, and basically poked a multimeter probes at different places on a circuit board, and I'm like, well, it doesn't have any power because it's not plugged in. And then I plugged it in, and then shorted out a few things and burned up some traces. And I was like, this is kind of dangerous, but I'm gonna figure this out eventually. So I started looking up, I wrote down all of the numbers and letters on the chips that were on the circuit board for the slow cooker, and I figured I would figure out what could possibly be making the change, what could be making it not heat. So I looked up what the chips were, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm reading. And I looked up the heating elements, and I found out that the heating elements, the way the heating element works is you run a lot of electricity through it, and it's just a giant resistor. So the resistor builds up a lot of heat, and that's how it performs the heating task. Is that you should have connectivity between it. And I knew what an ohm was. I knew what resistance was. And I looked at my notes, and it said that when I connected my probe points to to run through the heating element, I got no connectivity. And I'm like, well, maybe I read it wrong. Like maybe it was shorted on the other side, maybe on the circuit board side, because I didn't disconnect it. I didn't isolate the item before I checked it. Like, maybe it is that. So what did I have to lose at this point, except for, and this is the overarching theme, is what do you have to lose? It's like you bought something that was inexpensive and broke within the first couple weeks. You're about to throw it in the trash, but what do you have to lose of just taking it apart and taking a look at it and seeing if anything looks burned out or anything looks weird, or just poking around in there, seeing if you can find anything or learn anything. So I took it apart, and the heating elements all wrapped within, I forget what it was like. It's like a paper of some kind, but obviously not flammable. It was weird. I don't know what it was. But in unwrapping it, I could see that the actual wire heating element, the thing that got hot, was clearly broken in the middle. And so I went online to look for replacement heating element for Hamilton Beach crock pot model number whatever. And what I could find was that not only was there no heating element to buy, but there was that crock pot did not exist. What did exist were newer crock pots that were almost of the exact same, had the same face panel, like circuit board, the buttons and everything, but the size was just a little different. The shape was just a little different. The crock pot part was just a little different. Like the shape of the pot that you cooked in was just a little different. And I was like, but I can't use any of those parts on this crock pot. I was like, oh, I get it now. It's designed to break. It's designed for you to not be able to get parts for it. It's designed for you to throw it in the trash and buy a new one. Because, hey, it was pretty cheap anyways, right? Like it wasn't like a industrial grade or commercial grade crock pot or something. What do you expect? It's just consumer grade. It's expected to break. You're expected to buy a new one. That's why it's priced so low. Well, nuts to that is what I say. Because we're going to turn that on its head by taking these cheap products designed to break and fixing them, or at least harvesting parts out of them, or shorting them out so that they work. But even if one part breaks, we can still get some function out of it. So what I wound up doing is I took the heating coil wire, and I knew it was electricity that transferred through it, and I couldn't solder the wire together. And I knew that if the element heated up, I probably couldn't solder it anyways, but I figured I would just kind of get it to hold on. But the solder wouldn't stick to it, so I figured it was made of something else. So I'm like, it's just electricity. I'll just fold it over itself. So I did a little, just a fold over and kind of a crimp. And kind of rewrapped it, and then put it back in, and it heated up. Actually, funny story, I remember now. The crock pot had a low and a high setting, and had a controller board. And the controller board was such that the you could tell it, turn on low and then turn on high, or turn on high for 5 hours and then switch to low, or program it to just run for a certain period of time. But whenever I plugged it in, it would just immediately start heating up to maximum heat. So I knew some other part of the board was fried. But the crock pot was dead, and now it heats. It was, I think, there's a vlag where I talk about the smart crock pot or dumb crock pot or something like that. If you look that up, I talk more about this in depth. But at that point, I had a dumb crock pot. You plug it in, it heats up to maximum heat, and then it stays there until you unplug it. So, it's funny. So I was like, all right, cool. This is good enough. I'll take this. So wrap it up, close it up. And then years later, as I'm learning more and more about electronics, I was like, oh, I pull out the crock pot, and I was like, oh yeah, this doesn't work. I'm like, oh, maybe I can fix that now. So I look through my notes, and I find the chip numbers, and I look them up, and I'm like, oh, I know what this means now. Because I had been doing, learning more about electronics in the interceding years. I said, oh, this is probably the problem. So I went online, looked up the chip, bought a replacement, opened it up, swapped it out. At that point, I guess I could solder. Probably. I assume I can solder at that point. Because I've had some really bad solder jobs that just... And I think it was like Darlington pair transistors or something like that. But it was... But I changed it out, and there you go. You plug it in, it doesn't get hot until you tell it to turn on. So the chip, one of the chips just burned out, and the heating element burned out. And it's possible that the chip burned out, and then it was just always on, and then the heating element burned out because of that. But I think it's more likely they both just, planned obsolescence. It's the idea that this is something that is going to be used for a while, and then instead of allowing you to continue using it, it's just going to break. If you don't think that manufacturers make products designed to fail at a certain amount of uses, then you're a fool. It is literally designed to break after a certain amount of uses because it is designed to meet a certain criteria. That is, overproduction is waste. So remember that. If I make a pencil, well, that pencil is a bad idea. If I make a product, so the window. This window switch right here. The window switch is expected to be used during the life of a car, let's say 1 million times. So they need a switch with the life expectancy of 1 million, because over the course of the average of people that use cars, on average, use the average switch an average of 1 million times. So if you're below that average, hey, guess what? You get extra usage out of your switch, extra years out of your switch. But if you are above that usage, if you have kids that just kind of play with the door or play with the windows, then you are above average, and that means that your switch will fail earlier than it should. And you'll be like, oh, why is this happening? Or the car is designed to have a warranty for 10 years, and hey presto, at year 11 a whole bunch of things break. Well, guess what? After 10 years you are expected to have X amount of miles on the car, and at X amount of miles on the car you have X amount of wear on the transmission. So at X amount of wear on the transmission, you build to meet exactly that criteria. Because if you don't build to meet that criteria, your car is either bad because it fails before the average usage, or costs more because you paid extra to get the high usage switches that get 2 million uses, or you get the high usage transmission parts that get double the usage, and you charge everyone extra. The price goes up because you have to put more material into the product to meet non-average needs. So that is overproduction, and it is waste, and it does raise the cost of everything. So it is more or less designed to do exactly that. So don't balk when people say, "Oh wow, this is just something that the transmission went out 1 year after the warranty was up," that kind of thing. That is what it is designed to do. Where was I? Oh yeah, so the crock pot. And then in the back of my mind is I'm slowly remembering the crock pot, all this stuff died and I couldn't get replacement parts and all that stuff. But when you get down to the component level, it's like these are standard parts. They are industry standard parts, and this was something that I was not aware of. And it's pretty silly because I just wasn't aware of it. It's the equivalent of saying, well, everyone has a chip manufacturer. Toys R Us has a chip manufacturer for their toys. No, they use standard components. And those standard components can be expensive, nice components, or they can be cheap, easy to break components. Or they can have badly designed circuits that are kind of rude to those chips, so they have a reduced life expectancy. And Toys R Us doesn't care, because you'll just buy a new one. So the ability to get in there, to open up something and say, this is not working, I want to know why, figure out why, and then understand that you have standard components in there that you can just go on eBay and buy 30 of for $1 and swap them out, and hey presto, you've got a working thing again. So now you're taking advantage of the purchase by getting this cheap product that is basically, they expect it to break. Part of their cost, part of their profit is figuring out how much of it is going to break, or how often it's going to break, and what the expectation is that you will buy a new one, kind of thing. It's just kind of a pumping and dumping. Make a whole bunch of the thing, dump the thing on the market, and then never support it, never acknowledge it existed ever again. So you could take that thing, especially if it's a thing that you like, and maintain it, keep it going. There was it's kind of an odd comparison, but a pen. There was a pen, a ball, Pilot, V-Ball, I think it was a Vision, V-Ball Vision or something. But it's a lot like the current Vision line, except the entire body was translucent, like kind of smoked color. And it had the entire ink reservoir in there, and I really, really liked that pen, and I used it completely up. And I couldn't find another one. And for years, I had held on to the pen, and for years I couldn't find another one. And this is probably a bad thing to say for people who store stuff for eventual projects, but I kept the pen. And a few years ago, I looked at the pen and I said, I've kept this for years. What am I going to do? Figure out a way to refill it? Come on. And I just threw it in the trash. Well, guess what? Nowadays, people are refilling those pens. They figured out a way to open them up, how to refill them, and how to get them back working, the way they were before. And I'm kicking myself, like, if you got a thing and you like the thing, and it's possible to maintain it, even if it's not possible, like, you can do things to keep these things running. Or you could replace all the internals and keep the outside, keep the casing of it, because you like the casing for it. There's a lot of options available to you. And the only thing that's stopping you is your effort to try, your ability to try to look online and figure out either someone who's already done it, or poke people and say, hey, I have this thing. What do I need to look at to try to get it back working again? And see what people say, even if they yell at you. So just try, and you'll be amazed what you can maintain, what you can keep going. That crock pot died at year 2, year 3, I think, and it's been running since. We don't run it a lot, obviously, but still, it's something that we didn't have to buy a replacement for, and that we get a lot of use out of now. So learn stuff. This is where I do the conclusion. Also, if you have other topics, I suppose this is a good thing to ask. If you have topics you would like me to talk about, and they somewhat fit into this paradigm of weirdness that I have, feel free to drop them in the comments and bike vomit describe.